on every other Saturday to join us for the investor boot camps or the investor master classes. So, I welcome Balram Nair, our guest for the day. And, I'll take a minute to quickly set the context for both Balram, who's, agreed to join us and interact with all of you for an hour. So, for a lot of you who are probably coming and attending this for the first time, uh, this context could help. And for the others who've been attending our, Saturday sessions for the last 1 month, what the context is going to be, right? Before I start, all those who attended one of the investor master classes before, can you just drop a yes on the chat so we know that you know the format, you know what happens. And we've had so far about 4 of them. We started in December, and the idea was primarily to create this community. That's something that HeadStart has been doing, creating community of founders. But on the other side, we realized that a lot of us on our first network wanted to start investing in startups also, right? A lot of us have been interacting with startups for a long time, directly or indirectly. And that's where we felt we would love to learn more about startup investing, angel investing, and start putting in that money in startups. So that is the reason we thought, let's bring this community together, let's start exchanging learnings, and let's start co-investing, right, in startups. So as a part of it, you were listening to quite a few speakers in the last 4 weeks. We had folks who've done deals as the lawyer or the CA in the deal. You had investors like Arpit and Prajakt from Bloom. So they gave you different perspectives to how they see deals. And the intention is each week we have a senior leader from the investment ecosystem who's really been there, done that in the middle of dozens of deals, if not more. And that's where today we have someone who's not just done dozen, but 4 dozen deals. With one of the leading angel networks in the country, the Chennai Angels. Thank you so much, Balram. Thanks for joining us. We've got a bunch of very aspiring angel investors here, people or the tribe that you work with very closely. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting, Gautam.
Pleasure. So, Balram, I'll just set the context again from this session's perspective, right? So you come with a very solid experience of running, one of the leading angel networks in the country, right? So Chennai Angels, being in the ecosystem, we know how respected it is for driving a lot of deals. You've been able to mobilize the ecosystem in this part of the country, and you've also been able to successfully invest, in multiple startups, right, which have been able to raise subsequent rounds as well. So that is where we wanted to bring in certain areas of your expertise to the audience today. So a couple of things that that would be great over the next 1 hour is definitely your expertise, your insights into the angel network or angel investment ecosystem itself, how it has been evolving over the last 5 6 years. Number two, if you can probably start talking from your experience directly of deal making, run us through the process of what really happens when you from your scouting stage to actually closing a deal, right? You can talk from a Chennai Angels perspective, because you handle end to end on that. What really happens from a scouting stage to a deal closure? What are the timelines that you typically see? And then it will be also great if we can start picking up a couple of your actual documents, right? Templates or documents in terms of the term sheets that you use, right? So it'll be great to show our folks, a sample of what is really being used, in deals. So it'll be good to run them through that, and also specifically highlight some of the clauses that usually come, or there's a contention or that is raised, right? Where there are some clauses that could be founder friendly or investor friendly, and there is always there's a to and fro on those 1 or 2 clauses, right? What has that been, right? So that could be something that we could start with. And it'll also be good if you can touch on the entire art of valuation that you see typically at a seed stage, the first round of investment. What is it? Because in the last call, Arpit was saying, at least in the angel round, valuation is never a science. It is only an art. That as long as you're able to fix your pricing in a way that you're able to convince the other person, that is what your valuation is, right? So I just wanted to pick it up from there and see what your thoughts on the first check valuation would be, and if you can share our insights based on some of the deals that you've done. So I would leave it to you here. If you can probably start with your experience in the ecosystem and how you've seen it evolve over the few years, and then we'll probably move on to the next. So I'll just take a minute and share about the progress at Investor Circle and what's up next. So for the last 4 weeks, we've all been catching up every Saturday, and we've been learning or exchanging learnings here as a community. So next Saturday, is going to be the first time when a bunch of us, members as a part of the Investor Circle, will experience, an actual demo day and listen to startups pitching to us, where we can also ask them questions, evaluate them, and explore on should we invest or not. Right. So learning is always interesting, but as we learn, if we are also able to, experience, these pitches, an actual investment demo day, and also use our learnings to evaluate and see, are these startups interesting enough based on the thesis that I've built for me to invest in. So next Thursday we have our kickstart. We will be curating about 10 startups from a list of about 150 startups that have applied. We'll pick 10 startups that are fundable and put them in front of the Investor Circle members for them to evaluate and decide whether they want to place a bet. So Balram, I can see you, and I think I can. It's a lot more clearer now.
Yeah. Thanks, Gautam, and I'm happy to see so many aspiring angel investors. I mean, I know Kerala and a lot of other areas do a lot of work to get investors into a network or start investing. So Gautam, how do you want to do it? Do you want me to do an extempo throughout, or you margin with clarification?
I'll keep barging in, Balram. So how do you prefer? What do you prefer? Do you prefer going extempo for about half an hour on a
No,
bunch
I
of
would
these
prefer a
things?
conversation. Yeah, I would prefer a conversation because I
Then let's
didn't have
do a conversation.
great.
Like I said,
So,
it would be great if we can start with how you've been
yeah,
seeing
so
the
just to get a background, right? Yeah, just to get a background. There are a couple of participants today who have attended previous session, and a couple of participants who are new, correct? So all of them
That's right.
are
That's right.
okay. For the new ones, so what is their view on angel investing? Are they coming in for the opportunity to make money, or are they coming in because they want to give it back to the ecosystem? How is it that?
So I would say it's more of a blank canvas because they're still figuring out what. I mean, definitely there's a larger pull towards making money, right? Everyone here wants to make money for sure. So I would say everyone's here to make money, definitely. But there are a lot of them. There's a good mix of people who've been entrepreneurs themselves, right?
Okay.
But broadly, if I have to give you an underline, everyone's here to make money. Uh, how they make money, whether they diversify, those are things that they're looking to learn. Should I make one investment a year? Should I make 5 investments a year? How do I do that? Do I split into 3 startups? Those are things that they still are figuring out, or that's where they're trying to learn from these sessions on what would be some tips from senior investors like you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try and be as blatantly truthful as possible.
Absolutely.
If you cannot digest your 1 rupee becoming zero, then I think you need to take it slow. The way you can think about it is this: that is, if you go to a restaurant and you that is around 25 kilometers away, and then you have dinner and come back and realize you left 25 rupees back at the restaurant. Would you travel 25 kilometers to pick up the 25 rupees? Answer is no, right? So, because it's just 25 bucks. So for you, if that 5 lakhs that investing is not equivalent to the 25 rupees that you can leave back at the restaurant, this might not be an asset class that you should be considering at this point of time. Because it is definitely one of the most riskiest asset classes that is available. You're investing money primarily on the entrepreneur. You really believe in the group of individuals that have come together to start a company. You like the experience that they have. You like the space that they are in, and you try and understand the space to a large extent. But predominantly, you are actually betting on the individuals, right? You have absolutely no record to know if whatever they are trying to achieve or trying to fulfill or the problem they're trying to solve would actually make sense for a larger part of the consumers. There is the ones who are willing to pay the check. The VCs come in at a point of time when that is quite validated. Angels come in at a point of time where that's more of a guesswork, right? So definitely you are putting your money into quite a risky asset class. To give you a gist of the risk that you're talking about, we have invested into 55 plus startups. Out of the 55 startups, we've got around 11 to 12 exits. Okay, and barring one or two, the remaining 11 exits were not the ones that we thought were the best and would have given us a extremely good. The ones that we thought really we thought we were good had wound on for no fault of theirs. Right? No, absolutely no fault of theirs. They were not. They did not. A couple of them did not even know that they're going to wind down in the next 3 months, and they were doing decently large revenue, and they wound on for no absolutely no fault of theirs. So it is way beyond. So the risk that you are going to get into is at a different level altogether when it comes to startups. If you have the passion, if you are in a space and you're extremely good at that space, and you feel that you can add value to that particular company, it is beyond money, right? It is on how much more you want to contribute to the ecosystem. You could have worked in a startup. Uh, you need not be a part of the founding team, but you've been a part of key employee, got ESOPs, made a lot of money. You want to invest and you want to give back to the ecosystem. That is when you think you should look at startups as a thing. I think we're still a long way in terms looking at startups as an equity asset class, trying to, I mean, your secondary sales are very, very few. That means if you buy a share of a startup, how do you make money? Somebody has to buy the share back from you, right? So that's going to be an extremely difficult task. Your exits will happen only if somebody else is willing to buy. And who the somebody else is as either another fund that is going to put a larger check, or it is going to be a company that is acquiring this organization as a strategic buyout. IPOs, I mean, it's very, 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 very far away, right? So if you're looking at getting your money back in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years, it's either these two entities, either the fund or a startup or a strategic investor that has to buy you out. So keeping that in mind, keeping that risk element in mind, I welcome all of you all into the angel investing space. Wish you all the very best. And Gautam, what is the first thing that you wanted to know? I
So,
thought I need to give this disclaimer.
just to set the foundation, Balram, I wanted to understand how have you been seeing the last 5 years of the angel investment ecosystem? I could even say a decade, but last 5 years especially, how have you seen it evolve? Because that's when I would say majority of the deals in the Chennai Angels have happened, especially the last 3 years. So, if you can run us through, how have you seen the angel investment ecosystems evolve and the members that have been coming in? Any changes that you're seeing? What are your thought process on that?
Okay. So I will restrict my discussion very specifically to our network, right? I would not want to create inferences of the entire ecosystem space to a large extent because my experience with the network is more and I on a day-to-day basis, right? So you as participants to this event, when you listen to Bloom or listen to somebody else, all culminated is the ecosystem. So I'll give you my perspective, they will give their perspective, right? Their perspective is what is actually true for themselves. The rest is more of what you read and what you actually get to know from others. So Chennai Angels is a 10-year-old entity, 11-year-old entity, and we are still only 120 to 120 plus members strong. And we have very cautiously kept it that way. We could have actually become a 2000 members strong if we wanted to, but then we decided to keep it to 120, and we might not even cross 200. We will want to keep it within that particular number. Why? Because we feel that the investors will have to not only invest their money, but also will have to invest their time, their energy, share the mistakes that they have made and hold. So we have a 26 pointer contribution chart that we want investors to contribute to. And we say choose any 6 or 7 of them where you need to deeply involve with the startups. And we curate, we actually spend time and if a member wants to become a member with us, we first see whether any of the existing members know him, and then he has to spend enough time with the new member to understand whether it actually he actually would fit into the entire ecosystem. Post which he shares his profile with us. Post which 2 of the board members meet him, the executive committee meets him, spends an hour and a half, and telling him things in black and white and expectations. Only after that, and only after we are convinced he's coming here to invest and to give back to the ecosystem, and not for him to network and do and sell his product or make personal gains, do we allow him to come into the ecosystem. Right? After so much of work that we do, we have at least 40% of our network that is 30% of our network that is inactive at any given point of time, right? And that they could come back and go. So I'm talking about the investors where we have put in so much of effort, telling them in advance, so they have thought about it. They have said, yes, yes, I can go through this entire grind. I can invest money. I can invest 25 lakhs a year and not worry about it for the next 6, 7 years. There are a couple of them who still during COVID, when there is an issue with the business that they're dealing with, they still take a back step. So that is how the investor psychic is. So you can't do anything about it. But then we're trying to better that and trying to improve that percentage as we go forward. Second is on the type of deals that have come in. If you're looking at the last 5, 6 years, definitely sure the last 3 years, the quality of deals that are coming in are far, far superior in terms of the maturity of the investors that are coming in. Are good. A lot of them are second-time investors. A lot of them are failed entrepreneurs that come in. So they've had time to start something, fail, and then they come in. We love those type of teams that have actually failed once or twice, known what not to do, and then come back again, right? So I also believe that going forward, the type of entrepreneurs that are going to come in are also going to be extremely strong. So the expectations of investors also keep changing. So this entire ecosystem that way keeps evolving, right? So earlier, if you look at it, we will want to put in some money and get 10x, 20x, or 100x type of return. Today, that is not the only motive. You know that you can get a free 20, 30, or 100x, but an angel investor will never get that, because by the time the fund gets into a Series B, the Series B guy will insist that you need to step out, because for him to manage an entire network of 20, 30 investors is going to be a headache. So he'll say, uh, please have to step out. Might be one or two larger individual investors might stick on, but the others will definitely have to encash and move on. On the whole, the startups that are coming in, remarkable. They've actually moved off from the typical aggregating business to actually solving real-time problems. The quality of entrepreneurs have actually improved. In fact, 2020 we have seen one of the best group of investors I personally visited in the last 6 years is in 2020 during COVID, and the maximum number of investments we've made ever any per year is currently this year. So this, I personally believe that the ecosystem is improving. It is a good time to start looking at investing in the startups also, and you should actually spread. So whatever your allocation is, you should actually spread.
And Balram, have you, how has the inbound request been coming for you? And the member quality, member type, the quantity of member requests. Have you seen any changes in it in the last few years? Is there any pattern that you've seen?
Uh, Quality of member request, not much, because we only taken through referral. So we don't advertise for members. We don't send out any message saying that we want to increase the member base. It's only if it's through an existing investor. So we increase our member base by around 15 or 20 odd members a year. On average, 5 to 7 move out every year. So a 10 odd member increment every year is what we see, and that's been happening for the last 5, 6 years. The deals is very interesting actually. So we evaluate around 1,000 plus deals every year. Okay, and that's increasing as we go. It keeps increasing the number of deals that come in. Out of which 80% of the deals are inbound deals.
Right.
99% of the inbound deals we don't fund. We end up not funding. Not that we don't fund, we end up not funding. Right. So the truth is that the fundable deals, right, that need not be the best deals in the market, but the perceived best deals in the market get funded without an issue. Right? An example that I keep telling is that Zoho has bought out one of the largest SaaS. It's like a factory churning out SaaS companies in Chennai. Girish Freshworks is one of the first companies that came out of Zoho, which is a unicorn, and Girish is part of Chennai Angels. But none of these Zoho companies ever had to approach Chennai Angels for a fund. They had their own source of money, and we've not even got a single guy from Zoho to come to Chennai Angels, right? So if you are in the correct equation, where all the investors see and say, "Oh, that take this, you're going to get money," they will not even come to any network. They will not apply any.
I think, and the assumption would have normally been that, Chennai Angels being in Chennai, uh, your main focus has always been SaaS startups, right?
Yeah,
So,
a lot of them ask me, "Do you fund outside Chennai?" I said, we fund more Bangalore startups than Chennai startups in the first place, right? So we fund all over India. They think we were a SaaS funding entity. Nothing. We've done product companies. We have funded Chai Kings. We funded a company called Bragg that is the first company that started lingeries for teen. Indus Valley, there is a cookware brand. Glassic, there is an eyewear brand like your Specs Makers. All that. So we funded pure product companies also. We've not been a SaaS. So what I'm trying to tell is the good deals, the good perceived deals automatically get funded. I don't think a lot of the networks don't get access to them, right? So
mhm.
that is a way. The companies that apply to us directly are the ones that I think they've tried a lot of places. They keep continue to keep trying, and they come to us. There are a lot. In the middle. There's a huge ecosystem that plays, like what you are doing, right? What Head Start is doing. So that is a balance that you bring up. You take up companies that have come up that do not have that super duper connects, and that do not fall under these so-called best startup category, and then you groom them, and then you bring them up, and then you pull them out. Right? There are a lot of gems in those categories. Those are the interesting spaces that we look at. So 80 plus percentage of the companies that we fund are either co-investments that we've done with others, or that we have picked up from y'all, or we picked up from Axeler, or picked up from an incubation cell, or picked up from accelerator programs, or seen at large events. 80% of them are such companies.
Absolutely. I think there are 2 points that you mentioned where I want to take the next question forward. So one was on the co-investing part, right? So something that, was also being discussed last session was the fact that, when you're signing the first check, there are some of the investors who believe that they want to do all by themselves, right? So, and then there's another group of investors that feel it's better when we co-invest because there are certain strengths that each of us bring to the table, like what you first mentioned, that if you feel you're strong in a particular sector or a domain, you're able to add value. So I would love to understand from you in terms of what your belief is and what you propagate in terms of how do you see syndicates, how do you see co-investing, because that may be new for a lot of people here.
Okay. So 2014-15, we have done, in the year 2015-16, we've done close to 12 deals. A good number of them, 60 odd percent of them were actually funded only by TCA, where the entire angel round was a 2.5 crore round, 1.75 crore round, 2.5 crore. Like today, most of the deals are way above 5 crores. The first round that they're raising are way above 5 crores, right? So as a network, one, I will not be able to fund 5 crores. So that is the underlying thing. Second is that, okay, a very truthful fact is that I need to source deals. And I am definitely the best deal sourcing engine in the country. Okay, and because of our own limitations, we're not somebody, or no, none of the networks are some place where all the entrepreneurs will stand in queue saying that please fund, right? So then we need to always share deals. So what we believe is that nobody is a competitor in this space. Okay, we're all looking for opportunities, and looking more than an opportunity, we're looking to give back to the ecosystem and grow the ecosystem. So what we believe is that if I get a good deal, I always would want to share a part of it to multiple other syndicates for two reasons. One, you give, you get back. Two, I validate and somebody else also validates independently. So he is never influenced with my decision, because there are a lot of deals which somebody is willing to invest and we have rejected it, and vice versa, right? It's not that just because TCS is doing it, IPV does it, or some other AngelList does it. Not necessarily because AngelList is doing it that TCS is doing it. So one, we get, and so because your validation point is so little, we want multiple parties to validate it, and we're extremely happy to co-invest. So the only issue that happens with co-investors, who will lead, and ideally, who should lead is I mean, so we would directly lead if we have an individual investor who's an expert in that particular space and who can handle the company. So if I'm investing into a particular sector and we do not have a lead investor within Chennai Angels who's willing to be on the board and handhold the particular company, then we should not take the lead. And then we will be giving wrong guidance to the entrepreneur. Hence, we don't mind handing the lead to the co-investing network if they have a good individual or a group of individuals who are willing to guide the entrepreneur. Then we get into what rights do they have, what rights do we have, and I've never had an issue with any of the co-investors or we, in terms of we giving away certain rights and we holding certain rights, and then the lead typically should have the larger rights.
So which is totally fair. And on the second part that you were mentioning, right, in terms of sourcing, like, there was a very interesting part which you were saying on, it is always, there's a creamy layer on top, and then there is a layer that probably doesn't have access, like the creamy layer where
The
direct
perceived
access.
creamy layer, I would not.
Perceived, okay,
Yeah,
perceived
I
creamy
would not
layer,
be. Yeah,
which
they also
probably
fail, right?
has
Yeah, correct.
which probably has a lot of access to some of the super angels directly, or the VCs. So and which is where you were talking about the pipeline, right? So the source for the pipeline, potentially, like you said, could be through the other angel networks, or the brothers in the ecosystem who end up sharing deals so that you can co-invest together. And you brought in a very nice point where it is not just about me giving, but that paves way for me getting a deal back, and additional validation, right? Apart from potentially not being the only investor and diversifying my risk as well. uh, so that is where a very interesting point came in terms of where do you potentially source these from, because you're looking at a pan India network, and you mentioned incubators and other funds and accelerators. uh, Maybe a quick point into how do you validate a startup, right? So let's say, because you keep getting 1,000 deals a year, right, or at least 1,000 interests a year, what are some of the top points that you quickly validate? Maybe you can even point out, are there things that you differentiate between sources from where they come, right? Direct inbound versus coming through from a partner. How do you validate the startup? What are those North Star metrics that you definitely see?
Okay. So we would the approach that we have to deal evaluation is a very constant metrics, right? Unless and until it comes from one of our own investors, because eventually so Chennai Angels is a member-driven entity. We are a 6-member team. We have a CEO. I'm there. A colleague of mine called Darshan is there, and we have three other supporting staff. And we will not be able to evaluate 1,000 deals in a year, and we will not be able to do what we're doing without So we actually have a good bunch of investors who are part of our daily function in terms of deal evaluation and a couple of things in terms of portfolio company management. Members actually give us their time and all these things. So what happens is that if a member refers a deal to us, saying that I've spent time with this guy, I've been referred by a friend, I've spent a couple of days evaluated, good guy, take it forward, then we actually don't look at any of those things. We directly bring them on even to a presentation. So we might just refer to one. I mean, if the person is a sector expert, so for instance, if somebody's in the fintech sector, and that member gives us a particular deal and says that take it, then we just bring it to presentation because he's an investor, he's in the fintech space, and he's bringing a fintech company. But if a fintech individual brings in a space tech company, then we try and get it validated with somebody who's relevant once, and then we bring it in. All the other companies go through one standard process. One is uh, we take in their decks, and there is an internal round of evaluation that happens either by me or the CEO does one initial check. Then it goes into a panel of investors. That panel will consist of a standard bunch of 2, 3, or 4 investors plus sector experts. They come and sit and evaluate the company. Post evaluation, we call the entrepreneur for normally earlier it was a one-on-one if possible. Else now it's a Zoom. We spend enough time to understand the space, all that. If we feel that we are still not confident, only then we go for a business DD. Else we bring him on to a presentation. If we feel that we have large organizations within TCA who can validate what he's doing, then we give it to that company and ask their relevant departments to. If it's a HR solution, we will give it to one of the companies that has 4,000, 5,000 employees and ask the HR to evaluate this product to see whether they will take it. So similarly, we open up so that also becomes a potential customer for this particular startup, and then we evaluate. So that is the evaluation process that we do, and we try and do this entire thing to say yes or no in a matter of a month's time. That is, somebody comes to us today. By the time if it's a yes, if it's a no, that could happen in the third day, 2 weeks time, within 2 weeks time. Or if it's a yes throughout to the presentation, we try and confirm it in a month's time. We try and push to see whether we can actually do it. So we also use this platform called Skip, which is now actually helping us to move things even faster, because it's now we don't lose deals. Everything is timed with a time lag, so that if it goes beyond a particular day, it triggers. So if you're interested, I can actually show you one of the small evaluation metrics that I have. Yeah, I'll just share my screen. So this is the metrics that I mean, this is it's something great. It is a very basic stuff that we have something called polling. In a polling, what happens is, after all the presentation is done, everything is done, we send uh, an email with a note and the presentation and recommendations to all the investors, so that they can sit at their leisure and look through it and then say yes or no. So these are the critical things that we look at, right? So this is a nutshell of the entire business is put into a nutshell, so that he can read it at the body of his mail and get a fair idea in terms of what what this company does. First part is just the headquarters, European corporation, the currency. The next part, actually, the most important part is the founders. But founders, we can't do anything. We can't. This sheet cannot give any view on the founders. You'll actually have to meet the founders, talk to them, understand the passion the founders have, and that's a different exercise. That's the reason why Zoom is it's a boon and a bear in one way. Because I'm able to get 50 odd investors on a Zoom call, which I was not able to do earlier. But then the fact that I'm not able to actually meet the entrepreneur in person, see his body language in person, talk to him. In a presentation day, we actually stay back and interact with the entrepreneur. I mean, so you see him, you see the way he handles multiple people. That actually gives us a lot of confidence. But we're not able to do that. That's another sad part. We try to bring back in-person presentations from web, partial in-person. That is, we'll have only 20 people in the room, and we'll also incorporate that with Zoom, so that multiple other people can join. But then we definitely want to actually meet entrepreneurs in person. So that is left out of this. We've done that independently. Second, we see is the problem statement. We understand what the problem statement is. Is the problem statement worth solving for, right? So once I know the problem statement, then I relate the problem statement to the number of people that have a problem, right? So when Ola had come out, and when the founder was talking about the problem statement that he had, right? I saw his presentation. So he's saying that you stand somewhere, you're waiting in your house, you you tell you want to go from point A to point B, and you say okay. A cab picks up the request, and based on your location, the cab comes to your house or to the point where you are. You get on and walk. So the problem statement for me was, when I heard that, was so compelling, because every time I need to get out of the house to go somewhere, it is a drudgery for me, because in Chennai you need to fight with the auto guys. You need to fight tooth and nail just to tell that fellow bloody idiot, I don't have to travel. I'm just traveling a kilometer, charging me 300 rupees. What's wrong with you? And they were not bothered. And they also know you're early morning, you're urgent, and you're desperate. They will just not budge, right? And going for meetings with those with after arguing with them was a real nightmare. This was a solid problem statement, and I could relate to see how many people in Chennai, in Bangalore, in Bombay, in Hyderabad, all over India, actually all over the world, will have a similar problem. So then the problem, so the larger the group that has a problem statement, the larger your TAM is, right? So the problem statement is an extremely strong point that you should look at. And the more you can relate to this problem statement, the stronger the proposition is. Second is a product that is the product that solves the problem. Uh, there are multiple car apps that were there, right? Even after Ola and Uber, there are multiple car apps. But then you need to have an extremely strong product and the TAM, right? Given the fact that the founders are good, right? Under the assumption that the founders are good, these are the three critical things that we look at. One is the problem statement. Two, how big is the problem? that is how large is your TAM? No, that is one. And third is your the product. So this combination is the most critical combination. Overall, when you do the evaluation, eventually it comes down to this particular combination. Then we look at the revenue model, and if you're getting into a model where you say I'm going to spend money, download apps, go into 1 million, 2 million, 3 million downloads, and then think about monetization. At one point of time that could sell, but today we are more worried about how you can start monetizing. So we today worry about a sustainable organization also. So our expectations of 100x has now come down. We are okay. We're saying that what happens if we fund you and then you're not able to raise the next round of capital immediately, right? You burn, and after you burn, you're not able to raise the next round of capital. Are you able to sustain and sharpen yourself for the further fundraise, or you're going to just fall off flat because you don't have the next round of fundraise? So we would now started looking closely at the revenue model. How fast can you start generating revenue, and what are your margins are? If your margins are strong, then it is fine. If the margins are weak, then it's difficult to build business on a weak margin. So then the last part is your founding team, your ask, your pre-money valuation, how much you're diluting, yeah, and the exit options. So in core, the middle two blocks is where we concentrate on.
No, I'm saying this is a pretty robust sheet for a, for a start, right? It gives you at least the key details. From here, it's easier to get into these uh, detailed conversations that you will take it forward from there. So I'll probably just dive a bit deeper into 2 points. So we wanted to also, understand from you, because you took the time out to run us through the entire process or the life cycle from sourcing till closing. We also wanted to, understand from you on what a typical term sheet with the TCA looks like, and what are some of the clauses that gets contested. But before that, I will pick up a couple of questions on behalf, and I'll just reframe it for the benefit of everyone. Uh, one of the thoughts is, we still have, from a first check perspective, we have networks, or syndicates that invest. We have individuals, which is friends and families that put in money, right? Multiple people, putting in money in their individual capacity, versus networks or syndicates coming together and investing together. Uh, because we were talking about the fact that even for networks, picking the right startups is not very favorable, has not been very favorable, right? So we see so many startups to pick a few good startups. So something that has been in the mind of a lot of people is, can you again probably reiterate or share your thoughts on investing on behalf of syndicates or networks versus investing as a in a friend and family round, or directly in startups that we know? How do you see this from a process as well as risk perspective?
Okay, one is
Balaram, a disclaimer. I mean, let's
yeah.
assume that these are investors who are not very, experienced, right? So,
Okay.
These are first-time investors, or they've made one or two bets.
So the initial round of capital, right, that the company requires, that is when if I'm a founder and I register a company and I start a company and I'm building the product and I still need money. There are three categories of people that give you three Fs. I'm sure everybody's spoken about the three Fs. Right? You have friends who will give you money because you're a friend, a close friend of mine, and if I have surplus cash, you tend to help friends. Typically, family also does the same thing. You have money, and then your brother wants money, your dad will have able to help you. And good close cousins, they don't mind helping you. The third category, very interesting category of people who give money at that stage. They're called fools, right? So there's no other reason why you'll give money to a company at that stage. Right? However big you are, it's difficult when you fund a company at that earlier stage. Okay, so that is one part of this entire story. Second is the amount of money they require also is not a 5 lakh, 3 lakh, 10 lakh, 20 lakh check. They need money. They need money to either prototype. They need money to step out of the market, meet customers, build, pay small salaries to a tech team to finish product, and pay off his rent. So they need definitely a 30, 40, 50 lakhs to, even if I'm working on extremely bootstrapped scenario, I need at least 30, 40 lakhs a year to sustain and go, right? So if you have the money, investing 30, 40 lakhs into a business is not advisable. Even individuals with a couple of 200 to 1,000 crores are doing 5, 10 lakh, 20 lakh as an angel round. Right? And you spread. They also do uh, $1 million checks also, but into a different stage of company, not into an early stage company. So for a startup, if he's going to go to individuals to raise capital, he have to go to like 25, 30, 40 individuals and make individual deals to get that money, right? And he has to transact with 40 different individuals to do it. So if an individual investor is thinking about giving money independently, that means he also has to engage with the startups in a similar fashion. I would personally recommend that you go through a syndicate, right? Because the job of the syndicate is to use you in your area of expertise, okay, complement in the area that you're not strong in, and give a wholesome offering to a bunch of investors. So the syndicates are also in two forms. One is a network like ours. Two is an online network or a network like your IAN or IAN also to a different extent, but your Let's Venture and One Crore, where the team is extremely strong. Okay, and out of the 5,000 odd investors that are part of the Let's Venture network, good 95% of them are just investors. They don't get involved in the deal sourcing. There's no involvement with the startup at all. So there is a startup that comes out of the platform. You see who else is investing. You like to be part of the deal. You commit before the round is closed, and you keep going. You continue with your work. If that is what you want to do, then any gentle syndicate is good enough. But if it's a passion, right? Building a business is a passion. Giving back to the ecosystem is a passion. You should join smaller networks where you are willing to spend money, you have the capacity to do it, and the willingness to do it, and you have the time to do it, and you give back to the ecosystem. So it purely depends on what you are looking at. If you're looking at it as an asset class, as a pure investment option, you're willing to risk that particular money. Join a lot of these networks where you can just give the small money and then wait and see. They'll give you big quarterly reports, read it, and know where they're going to write off the investment in 1 or 2 years' time, or it's going to give you some sort of a return back. Else, a syndicate is a much better option than doing it by yourself.
No, absolutely. So I think just to broadly summarize this for Dev Kishore, what Balram is also talking about is at an early stage, unless you've been a very experienced investor by yourself, it is always better to invest as a part of a network or a syndicate, because you have people who've done that, or you have people who come together and exchange their strengths, right? And you just focus on what your strength is. It could be the domain, it could be just the money, right? Whatever it is, play your part while the others play theirs, right? So Balram, can we probably,
one more thing is that, see, the growth of the company depends on the amount of capital they raise going forward. So what happens is angels invest because we see a potential that a VC can invest tomorrow. Right? A VC invests seeing a potential that a larger VC can put more money into the company. Right? Now, when we invest, we have at least around 15 to 20, anywhere between 10 to 20, 25 individuals on the cap table. Right? When you look at a TCS cap table, it will be founders, co-founders, ESOPs, investors, and then you will have individual names. Although sometimes they will put it as Chennai Angels and put a consolidated percentage, but the actual detailed cap table will be individual names, individual shares issued to all these guys. So for a venture fund that comes in, right, it becomes extremely difficult for them to deal with an organization where they have, say, 50 individual investors acting independently. To go back to all of them independently to get signatures is going to be a big headache. So for us, what we promise them is that you have to deal with only one entity, that is 10 Angels. What the 20 people that we bring onto the table do is always going to be a group decision, not an independent decision. The startup or the fund does not have to deal with many people. They already have to deal with one, the board member or the office. They will not have to deal with. Even then, for us to get back to uh, for instance, they want a signature, they want an approval. If it's one individual, you just get the approval, right? But if it's 20, you need to make sure that you reach out to them. They should read your email. They should say yes. It takes at least 2 to 3 days, the fastest, to get a complete 100% response. Right? So today the startups, the good ones are confident, are insisting that you come as a fund. That is, you as an angel fund and then come through a fund, then having 20. So I foresee that in the next 3 years, we might not even be doing individual investments as a group. We might have to have a vehicle and then.
Pool and have an SPV and do it.
So then investing as an individual to a startup, I would completely advise not to do that. You can be a mentor, you can support them in this in the function that you're strong and engage with them. But then when it comes to investments, come as a group.
Right. Totally fair. And any other pointers that you see in terms of red flags that typically get raised during that first check? Let's assume the case of this 50 people on the call, them co-investing, them creating groups or syndicates within themselves. Let's assume a best case scenario and co-investing. So, what are typical red flags that you see, during the first check? Time, during your due diligence, etc. What are some of the things that, as an investor, that we need to be prepared for?
Okay, so integrity is the most important thing. So it has to be a two-way. It is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street, right? So when you say integrity, you need to be truthful to the entrepreneur, whereas we expect the entrepreneur to be truthful to you, right? So something that you say you cannot go back on. If you've given a word to the entrepreneur, and you have to keep up to the word, right? So if I've signed a term sheet and uh, I evaluate the business and I sign a term sheet, I should not go back on the term sheet for a business requirement. Okay, I can write off the business, but I need to fund the entrepreneur. That is the policy that most investors should follow. Similarly, when I do the initial round of evaluation, I do not ask for any documentation proof. I trust if he says I do X amount of revenue, I trust that X amount of revenue. If he says ABCD is what it is, I trust ABCD. And I take a decision to sometimes issue a term sheet based on what he's telling me. After the term sheet is signed, we do a due diligence, we do a financial legal due diligence, and we find that there are misrepresentation of facts. Then we completely walk off, irrespective of how good the opportunity is. We just turn around and walk off. There's no way that we could do. So one is you should always check to see whether the integrity component is extremely strong. Okay, if I don't know, I do not know. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But then we do not want them trying to cover up something. So anything in that line comes up, then you should be extremely careful. Second problem that we see, which is critical, is the company construct. Right, we find that a lot of startups who don't come, who individually for the first time they're starting up, they make a mess of the company construct. They issue shares to people. So for instance, the founders, as I told you, are the most critical thing, critical component of the company, right? If the founders dilute too early, then investors are not very happy about it. Simply because if a company becomes a unicorn tomorrow, the biggest beneficiary of that company has to be the founders, not the investors. Right? And if the founders walk out of the business at some point of time, the entire business goes for a crash. So we are ensured to see that the founders are the owners to a large extent, to a large part of the journey. Right? Much later is when the founder shares actually come dip low. Otherwise, the founders actually continue to be the predominant owners of the business. So sometimes you find that they have issued shares. There is a company that I saw that issued shares to a non-co. 40% of the company that came to the funding was owned by somebody who was not the founder. Right? And it was quite surprised. And he was part of the incorporation. That is actually, when the company is incorporated, he's put in some money and incorporated the company. But he doesn't build the business for them. He's not part of the. He's not employed in the company. He's employed elsewhere. Right? So we were not sure why that happened. So all these they were not given the advice at the right time. The construct of the company was wrong. Second is your statutory dues. So again, if the company is good, business is good, all that is done. If you have not paid your dues on time, the huge liability on your books, you will not get funds to clear liabilities. And imagine your GST bills are high and you've not paid PF. If you get funded and they come and catch you, the penalty might be huge, and 20, 30% or 50% of your funding might go into clearing these dues. And that's not what funds are for. So what you should be careful about is construct. You should be careful of, you should do a thorough legal and financial due diligence, and they will tell you what your red flags are. You'll be very critical about the red flags. You shouldn't invest until all those red flags are clear.
So maybe I think this would be the right time, Balram, if you can walk us through, the typical term sheet that you are comfortable with, and if you can highlight some of the clauses where you see back and forth, or contention happening. What are those common clauses that are usually either founder friendly or the other extreme of being investor friendly?
Yeah. So this is a draft term sheet that we use. So you're able to see my screen, Gautam?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
So another disclaimer here is that this is a non-binding letter of intent, right? So it is not a contract. It is non-binding. It is a letter of intent. That is one. Second is the shareholders agreement. Also, to a large extent, so this entire document will get transferred into the shareholders agreement. This is the first page is just the offer saying that dear so and so, we are Chennai Angels is willing to invest into your company, right? Okay, then we mention the amount that we're going to invest. Okay, then we talk about the company. This is the name of the company, the details of the company. This is the investment amount. Right? This is where we mention the valuation also. We say that the pre-money valuation that we mentioned here. And these are founder matters. Right? From here is where we start having fights. Typically, what happens now is the founders also raise like $1 million. They may raise anywhere between 5 crores or 7 crores as the first round, so they're able to afford a lawyer. Earlier, when they used to do 2.5 crore rounds, they never used to afford a lawyer, so they were okay with reading for themselves and understanding. It was easy to convince them. Now they have a legal team backing, right? So when I have a legal team backing, when they have a legal team backing, the legal team backs them, and then legally they'll say, "Don't accept to this, don't accept to that." So in one discussion, I asked the legal team guy. I said, hey, "Are you also representing any funds or all your clients? Entrepreneurs?" He said, "No, a couple of funds." I said, "Okay, now when you're representing them, how would you handle this particular clause?" Then he laughed. He says, "Okay, that be a part of a different discussion." Today, so it is that, right? So now, so we spend a lot more time, talking on all these rights matters, founder matters, right? So founders, so what we try to do is we try and ensure that the founders are not are demotivated to leave the organization. Right? We tell them that your shares will be held back and vested X percentage over a period of time, so that at least for the next 4 years, we are sure that they're going to be there, right? So why only 4 years is because in the next 2 years, he's going to get a good company. If they are growing, they need cash, they'll get a larger check. So when the larger check comes in, that company, that fund or the network will decide whether it's going to be another 4 years from then or not. Because he's worried about this money coming in then. So then we don't worry. We'll say that let the next investor come in and negotiate his terms. So this 4 years is that in case he doesn't raise any more capital at all, then we are saying that, okay, 4 years is where he needs to. By then we'll also know which direction the company is going in, right? Then we tell that the company, he should not be a director in another company. He should not have any other competing business. So we've actually made all these mistakes. These are all, whoever's created this document long back has gone through all these issues. So we've actually funded a company where the founder is into 2 different businesses, the 2 or 3 businesses. The issue is that if one business doesn't do well, he always has the backup to do the next one. He will not give his heart and soul to see whether this particular business will survive. Right? So we will never fund, or you should never fund a company where the founder is sitting on 2 businesses. The founder tells, I'm working in a company X today. This is my business idea. This is what I've done till now. I've built a product. The minute I get funding, I will quit my company and I'll join. That means he himself does not have confidence on his company, right? That's the reason he's still employed. Or one founder has come out, 2 founders are still employed. As soon as you get funding, I'll come because I can't afford them. You don't need to afford founders. Founders should work without salary if need be, or basic salary. So any of the critical guys are saying I will come when the fund comes. That shows the lack of confidence that company has, or that individuals have on the business they plan to run. So those are extreme strong triggers that you should be worried about. So he has to get into an employment agreement, right? All those are coming under founder matters.
Right.
Then we ask for a board director or a board observer seat. So if I'm the lead investor, we ask for a board director and an observer seat. So director has financial implications, anything to do with the company. Observer doesn't. So what we do is we take both. We normally exercise the observer seat, and access the board seat only if there's a critical situation. Otherwise, we be an observer and we manage most of our as being an observer.
Balram, if I can just quickly pause you there,
Uh,
any guidance on typically, when do you push for a board seat? When do you push for a board observer seat in your typical deals?
So if I'm the lead, I take an access to both.
Hmm.
I as an observer seat immediately, and take the right. I exercise the both seat only if there is a critical situation. But I have the right to have both.
Right.
So if I'm doing a syndicate, uh, at least one among the syndicate will definitely have both seat or the right to a both seat. All the others will have an observer seat. Right?
Right. And
Uh,
and and let's assume that I'm just going into more practical examples so that our members here can visualize that. So let's
okay.
assume that you make an investment and typically you brought in board 8 members, or 6 members coming in, and they invest in a particular startup. Uh, how do you do that? Do you appoint one who probably comes closest to the domain as the board director, and among the rest 7 of them, do they rotate every quarter as a board observer? 1 year they are appointed, another year another one is appointed, or do they just vote among themselves? How do you pick among a syndicate?
So okay. So one is the board director would definitely need to be somebody who is part of the domain who understands the space. Right? So he becomes a director. The observer would be somebody equally good or complementary to the business. We have never had a scenario where we had 3 or 4 individuals and we were rotating. So we request members to volunteer. We get volunteers for the observer they remain throughout the term. In case one has a concern or an issue, then he makes a representation saying that I would like to step down for whatever reason. Then we get somebody else on board. So we have not had a rotating because we would prefer it to be a constant person because it's good to have a constant face in
True.
guidance advice. The entire network is available at any point of time, right? So for instance the others are for instance we always approach the network for guidance. So we feel that CKR who runs Kevin Care is very critical to do a retail piece. Then we take CKR's help, their team's help at multiple points of time. But he need not be on the board or as an observer. Or sometimes he may not even have invested in that particular company. All right, but so we piggyback on the entire network that way, and it is
Right.
this board, us, the secretariat, or the board and board observer.
No, I think that's totally fair. And, I just wanted to, maybe what we'll do is we'll probably go through the rest of the document, and then I'll come up with my questions.
Okay, so then we have these are the standard rights that we have for the thing. So we have not elaborated those rights. We have a drag, tag, ROFR, anti-dilution, preempt, and then pro rata subscription to new shares. Okay, and okay, so these are the basic rights that we have. So, Gautam, you want me to run through what each right means?
Very, very briefly, Balram.
Okay. Okay. So, information right is mentioned. That is the most basic right, saying that I am entitled to information about the company. Your tag right is that I can tag along. So if I'm not the lead investor and the lead investor is selling lock, stock, and barrel, I can tag along with the lead investor, with the new buyer. So the new buyer will have to buy me along with the other guys. Or the promoters are finding a buyer. So let's say the promoters, after some 8 years of running the business, finds a buyer and wanting to sell their own shares. I can do a tag right and say that you can't sell your shares until you also buy ours. So you need to give us also an exit. Similarly, drag is the opposite. So drag is when I find an issue with the promoter, he's done something wrong, and he's not able to continue, or if he's not able to give us an exit in 5 to 7 years time, not able to raise funds, not able to give us an exit. If I find a buyer, as an investor, we find a buyer, the promoters cannot say that I cannot sell my share. I'll drag him and enforce my drag right uh, to make sure that he also sells his shares along with us. That is in case the buyer wants that. Your ROFO, you have ROFO and ROFR, the right to first refusal and right to first offer. That is if you are uh, uh, going for a further fundraise, I have the right to refuse the offer first before you give it to somebody else. Or ROFO is I can offer it to somebody first without telling you the price, and then if you do not want to buy it, you can tell me a price, and I'll go out. That is for the promoter, right? Promoter will offer it to me first. I'll say no. I'll say I'm willing to buy it at X price, and if he finds a buyer at a higher price, then he can sell it to them. I mean, he can subscribe to them. Um, and existing investors, existing investors have the right to subscribe to new shares. The first right to subscribe to new shares.
So Balram, how's been the pushback usually on this clause? Maybe from two angles. One where you're the lead, and one where you're not the lead.
Ah.
So how's the usual pushback on this particular
Which one is this? Which clause is this?
I'm talking about the ROFO, I mean rights part.
So the pushback that we have had, Gautam, on this, that of late founders, they don't want to. They have an issue with dilution, right? They're saying that if investors are selling, uh, they want to be the share should be offered to the promoters first and then to others. That is, we are not okay with that. No, the promoter should refuse the offer first. That is, I go find a buyer, and I get a buyer to buy my shares at say price X. I should offer that price X to the promoters first, and only if the promoters say no, I should go back to the buyer and say I do it. The buyers are not very interested to get into a negotiation when there's a ROFR available.
Right.
So then now today the promoters are saying that if they should be given the right to buy. So we sometimes put a foot say no. Sometimes we give them a ROFO. We'll offer you first, right? You can state your price. If you say no to the offer, then it's fine. I can go out and sell. You tell your price. If you say 100 rupees is the price, if I'm able to go out for 110, I can go out. I can't go out and sell for 100 or 90. I'll offer it to you. If I'm okay with the price, I sell it to you. If I'm not okay with the price, I can go find a higher price. Right. So that there are entrepreneurs who are now coming back with. We also have an exit. Wherein if they're not able to give us an exit, then we can drag them and all. They have an issue there also. That's where they can push back. Another area is your under the directors thing. You have something called your affirmative vote rights. So affirmative vote rights is the biggest area where we have a fight. So there are a list of things where the entrepreneur cannot do. Okay, few of them are standard, few of them are specific to the business. For instance, I would say that if it's a retail business, you cannot open retail chains without X number of retail chains without nothing, because each thing is a capital expense. You cannot spend more than X percentage without a permission. Bunch of clause tabs we put in saying that you need to reach out to us, get an approval before doing it. And sometimes they push back on that. This is where when you have co-investment, there's an issue. If you have two people giving approvals for day-to-day running of the organization, then it becomes a big headache. So we always us or the other, we tell them only one person should be there. All the other co-investors can get your ROFR tag, all that they can get. But the governance, that is your affirmative vote right options, has to be predominantly be with one individual, one group. One individual.
Fair enough.
Dilution is where you can't do a round lower than the current round, or you can't do an activity which dilutes dilutes an existing investor, other than getting new money inside. That is, you do a ESOP pool, or you any activity that happens where existing investor gets diluted, then we bring an anti-dilution clause. Liquidation preference is when the company gets liquidated, who gets what money happens. The exit option, I just touched upon the exit options. Conditions precedent is when we do an agreement, There are a lot of observations that come up which are critical, and we tell them to fulfill those agreements conditions first, and then we'll fund you. Those are conditions precedent. Conditions subsequent are the conditions we agree are not so critical. You can finish them after funding. Right? So those are the two things. And you have a small expense column. So this is how your typical term sheet is constructed.
I think this is very useful, Balram, because just going through a standard term sheet clause by clause, I think it would have given a lot of us an idea on what really happens through a deal. Uh, maybe
I can even share this with you. Anybody who's on the call is interested can.
So you can probably mail it across to Krishna. We'll ensure
I'll
that
send that.
we are putting together a resource pool for all of them to keep learning. In fact, what we're trying to do is a bunch of them, who've been attending and who've also been active in the ecosystem, wanted to start now, meeting startups.
Okay.
So next week, we're putting together a kickstart where some of the senior investors like you will be there, but we're also getting some of our investor circle members to come and experience it in terms
Okay.
of
Evaluation. How do you go through initial?
right. So that they experience a demo day where the startups pitch. You've been through Kickstart for 4 5 years now that Head Start does, but typically how does a startup pitch for that 5 10 minutes, and what kind of questions, or how do investors like you interact with them during that 5 10 minutes? What kind of questions do you ask, and how do you take it forward? So for a lot of them, it's going to be their first demo day that they are, or pitch day that they're going to be attending. Maybe a couple of maybe your 2 cents before a few of them attend their first pitch fest. Any thoughts on that?
On the
On the other side, before they experience it as an investor,
uh,
any thoughts, because you've been through hundreds of pitch sessions. A lot of them have been writing to us asking, what do I expect? I've never been on a pitch session, I've never listened to pitches, 10 startups pitching over 2 hours. What do I expect? How do I make good use of that session? Are there certain questions that I should definitely probe? So where we tell them that it's your first pitch session, you can definitely listen to the
yeah,
senior
that's
experts.
exactly what I had in mind. I think the best way is just to listen to a couple of them and go through. So you can contribute in your area of expertise, right? So you would have a domain expertise, and if the particular startup is in that space in your area, you make sure that you completely understand what it is. You can just listen to the views of multiple investors. And second, I would say is that don't get intimidated. So what happens with us is that a couple of new guys get intimidated by the old investors because the old investors are extremely large, big stalwarts, and it's very difficult if they say this deal is not interesting and you feel the deal is interesting. It's very difficult for you to stand up and say no, the deal is interesting because somebody who's really big is, I mean, somebody who's like a big superstar in the industry is caught up and said the deal is not interesting. I said you don't have to worry about that. If the deal is interesting, you can say the deal is interesting. And if you have a doubt, you want to clarify, you can always clarify the doubt. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So if you don't have those two inhibitions, then you're good to go.
No, absolutely, Varun. So I think last 75 minutes have been a lot of gems that I would say. I just wanted to touch one last piece before we end the session and take a few questions from the audience. Uh, your thoughts on the valuation in the first check, right? When it typically comes to the first check, because like you said, you may have some first checks who raise 40 lakhs. A lot of severely bootstrapped startups may simply want to raise 40 lakhs. Some of them may want to go all the way up to 2 crores, 5 crores. But how do you see the valuation game being played from the deals that you see?
Okay, so I mean, I'm not sure how many would be able to appreciate this, right? In the olden, I think even now, I'm not sure. At least I remember when I was small, when you go to buy these cattle, right? You go to a large ground where there are around hundreds of cows and bullocks standing there. Right? So have you seen them negotiating, Gautam?
Oh, on the village side, I've seen
Yeah,
a couple of negotiations, including the towel over the hands.
towel over the hands, exactly. So what they do is they will put their hand out. Okay, where's my hand? Yeah, hand out, and they'll put the towel over the hand. The other guy's hand comes under the towel, and they will move the fingers to negotiate the amount of money, right? And they agree, they'll come out. Your early valuation is exactly that. There's no absolutely nothing, nothing beyond that. And you have only the founders, and you have an idea to evaluate. How do you evaluate? You will give, so the basic thing is that you say this company requires X amount of money to run for 18 months, right? And you agree that he needs to spend that amount of money, right? The company might generate X percentage of the total expenses. A percentage of that is coming out of the revenue. The remaining needs to be so you need to support the remaining, and that's the capital that is going into supporting that particular bond, right? And you need to allow the company to run for at least 18 months. That is 12 months plus without any headache to run behind business, and the next 6 odd months to do the next round of fundraise. So 18 months of capital is what you require. You need to uh, totally add up the total burn that you're going to do in 18 months and raise that amount of capital. Right? So as an investor, you know that the company needs X amount, be it a couple of crores, to run for the next 18 months to reach a particular point where he is eligible to raise a Series A or the next larger round that's going to come up. So once you agree upon that, you the second thing you look at is for a company X, okay, what is the meaningful dilution that you can take and you should not take beyond that? And that is a negotiation that you fall under. It is not on the revenue side. It's not. There's no brand that you can give a value to. Nothing. Right? So it is purely on how much the company should dilute.
Being a CA, I would say, hey, discounted cash flow and all that, but it doesn't work in the.
We come back to that. We'll come back to you for covering our back. So that's a different thing.
It usually works when you already have revenue for X number of years, etc. But like you said, it's more of an art than science, and more of how well as a founder or as an investor, or depending on who you are, have you been on the negotiation skills, right? So, but is there any guidance that you would give that from a dilution perspective? Because if we have to work backwards, because we agree that there is no science to it to say based on this, like say the DCF, where we say this has to be the valuation. Can we work backwards and say we shouldn't ideally exceed a certain dilution in equity as a percentage in the first check round?
So what we do is Series B. We tell that he should be way above 50% plus when he finishes the Series B, right? So do cash flow statement and you do a projection. We try and understand. We try to go up to Series B and say that when you raise the Series B, and where would your revenues be, and how much would your expenses be, and you still should be above 50%, 55 above that, right? And then we work backwards. So the first round could be anywhere between 12 to around 15 to 20% dilution based on that particular projection. So that's the only way that we look at it.
So roughly we can assume that the first round when they're raising anywhere between 12 to 20, depending on the amount that they raise.
Amount that they're raising, yeah. Okay. And they should do that particular work. They should do a cash flow and basically do a projection, a detailed projection, and with probable amount that they're going to raise in the next round and the round after, and to keep a good cushion to say that you don't go below 50% when a Series B happens.
So maybe just to debrief and bring it in simpler terms, we probably ask them to say at this round, if you're raising say 50 lakhs or 1 crore, and it's a 15% that you're diluting. How long will this be typically used for? Does this give you a runway of 2 years, or when is your next potential raise? And at that time, how much will you raise, and how much will you dilute at that stage? So that they're able to work backwards and ensure that at a Series B, they still have that 50%.
50 and above.
50 and above that.
Higher the better.
Higher the better. Totally fair. And just as a sign off at this point before some questions, are there any pointers that you will have, to first time investors? I'll tell you one point that I just wanted to bring up here. Again, some things that I've seen being in the ecosystem, of working with networks or working with syndicates over investing alone is the strength of the network that it brings from not just being able to pool the capital but being able to support beyond investment. So I just wanted you to highlight on how important it is to bring that support as a group or as a network or as a syndicate post investment. I'm sure that is one big area that Chennai Angels brings in, in terms of not just putting in the money, but after putting in the money, using the network to mentor the founder, maybe even getting business connects. And like you said, the strength of the network in terms of building relationships with VCs, because ultimately your exit is dependent on, your relationship with the VC who wants to come in and give you that exit. So if you can probably just highlight on, the role that networks or syndicates play beyond just money.
So one critical, okay, to start off with, there is a person who's either the director or an observer, right? So he's entrusted to ensure that general governance of the company happens on a regular basis. There have been, okay, now what happens is not all are equal, not all are having the same mental. There are also IDs who don't have time for some reason, who don't respond. We have actually been able to step in and help the company rectify that. So the company can always come back, reach out to the others in the network, reach out to the other investors, and the investors actually help out the company to solve. One is the governance part itself is taken care of. That is one. Second is we try and support companies in specific areas. We have a quarterly update that happens, and the column that says what are the support that you want from Chennai Angels, and we try and extend those support from Chennai Angels. So they are from last time one company came and asked in terms of hiring support. So we try and get somebody who's an expert to what do you call address that particular problem for them. They want support in terms of marketing. They want support in terms of understanding a particular pricing strategy. So we get guys who understand the space within the network to come and talk. So we do. So this quarterly calls that happen among our portfolio companies is very interesting, and there's a support that happens there. And as a follow-on, we actually connect those companies to specific mentors, and then ensure that those particular problems are sorted out. Third is the network is so strong that when they want to start raising capital, we are able to. We have investment bankers that are part of our network. We have funds that are part of our network. So we actually bounce off a lot of ideas, a lot of our thought processes to them before letting a company go out and start raising larger rounds of capital. So for companies like Chai King, which we wanted to raise, we actually held back today because the feedback that we got from internally itself was such that we decided not to do. Otherwise, if we had gone to the market directly, we would have not had a. I mean, everybody would have known that Chai King has come out for a fundraise, and I mean, whatever. Right? It's a retail business. COVID is happening, so we've been advised internally, right? So that the amount of support that we get, so we give customer connects. We give customers, because among the 120 you could have large organizations that could be customers itself. A lot of mentorship happens within our portfolio companies from our portfolio range. So we try and understand the problem statements that they have within the organization, and if there is anything that we can support from we ensure that happens. So, and since it is a wide variety of members, the chances of somebody being strong in that area is always there.
No, absolutely. So, see, in fact, one of the thoughts behind, us at Headstart also trying to start putting this together, a quick background to the Investor Circle initiative was on one side, of course, a lot of folks in our network started reaching out to us. Now that Headstart also has presence in about 30 cities, a lot of people start reaching out to us on how can I start investing in startups, but I'm not fully aware of how can I really work with them. As a single person, I may not be the best person to invest in them directly. Right? So so that when it started, we started having these sessions, and we said, let's create a community where there's a lot of learning that happens. Right? You need not start investing. Right? Maybe these sessions will also tell you not to invest. Right? It is fine as long as these sessions give you some clarity. Either it makes you decide that you're not fit for startup investing, or it gives you conviction that it is good for you to start investing. It is fine. It is a win for us. right? But get that learning, right? And second, let's create this community of such. For example, the larger investor circle group that we have has about 150 people, and 150 people from different backgrounds, and they exchange the ideas to, over the period, keep exchanging some learnings on, investment. And that is where people who are ready to start investing, like you said, end up creating these syndicates from that group. And you will have these deals that keep coming in on a monthly basis through Kickstart, and you can potentially, come together and invest as a syndicate, right? So that typically, the idea is, as Head Start, what we've been doing is trying to do something for the community, support startups. It's always been founder first. Support them with the mentorship access, the incubation support, and the business connects. In that process, if we can be a bridge between people who are looking out for deals and startups that are looking out for investors who can invest, let's be that bridge is what we were looking at. And what I'm assuming over the next couple of months, Balram, is as more people keep attending these sessions and keep learning, and they get convinced that they're actually fit for investing, they would start, meeting more investors like you in our monthly demo days, and potentially start co-investing, as syndicates or as networks, right? And of course, the idea is also for Head Start to see which of these startups through Kickstart gets funded, and how can we as a network continue supporting them, till they probably raise the next round through a VC. But
Yeah.
the idea is to give them exposure to some of the senior investors like you through Kickstart, and jointly explore investment.
Yeah, but what you also need to do, Gautam, is that it's an ongoing process. If you venture into this, right, existing investors also needs to be, you need to have constant engagement with the existing investors. Because for whatever reason, if they make 3 or 4 investments and one drops off, and any direction of whether you're going to get your money back happens only after 2 or 3 years, right? And you stop investing in the middle, then you're gone. So you should have the capacity to invest whatever amount. If you're doing even 5 lakhs a year or 6 lakhs a year, you should do 6 lakhs a year constantly for the next 3 years. Right? And even if two of them clicks, just one or two of them clicks, you'll get back your money for the entire 3 years of investments. But if you miss a year of investing, that 6 lakhs a year you miss once, then you've actually a probability of you getting your money back goes down by like 45%.
No, I think that's a very fair, final word, Balram, in terms of whatever is your amount. I think two closing notes. One is whatever is your amount, split it across startups, and whatever is your amount, do it consistently for at least 3 years,
Yeah.
for you to start seeing the returns. And I think what I really also wanted to highlight from today's session was, do not really worry about, those complex terms that we actually saw. The financial and legal due diligence, leave it to the experts, but it's important as an investor to know what you're getting into and what you're signing up for. But trust the experts, trust the startup, and typically trust the founder. And wherever possible, always invest in a group. Invest as a syndicate, invest along with the network. It is good for you as well as good for the startup, and they don't have to deal with so many individuals as well. Any closing thoughts, Balram, for the 50 odd aspiring investors?
Anything from the chat? Any questions that needs to be looked at?
So I've been actually reframing a lot of those questions, and I've been taking it up with you.
Oh, okay.
And thanks to, I think, Dev Kushore, quite a few questions from him. I've been asking that. But for the others, what I would say is I've really enjoyed the last 1.5 hours. Pretty intense, but I would say informal conversation with Balram on an intense topic. We will continue to stay in touch. We have the WhatsApp group, and Balram is always there to guide more and more folks who wish to seriously start investing. And I think we look forward to meeting you next week, next Saturday. We will have a short session. We'll have probably a shorter 30 to 45 minute session, because we will have Kickstart after that. So Kickstart will start at around 3:30. We've curated about 30. From about 150 startups that are applied, we had curated about 30 startups which are actually fundable or can raise funds. From that, we would pick about 10 startups that are relevant to the pool of investors who will come on 30th. So that's one. Ujjwal, I would love to, check if you're there, and any closing thoughts that you have for our investor circle members and for Balram.
Sure. Yeah. I've been, so essentially, I mean, this is for everyone in the group. We decided, Gautam and I initially that, I would, I asked Gautam that you start the session first half an hour and then I'll pitch in and I'll probably take over. But then the discussion was so intense and it was, going so well, that I just thought, it's just better to be an attendee and just listen in. I think it was amazing session. Balram totally loved it. Lot of myth busting, lot of great, very nuanced, insights that we got about angel investment. And I'm sure, I mean, a lot of people, are also writing in that they learned a lot today. So thanks a lot for that. I would have just very, very quick two questions that, very sort of template questions that we call them. What is your, favorite go-to resource or a book that you would, prescribe to the beginners, around investing or startups, whatever you prefer?
So I was wondering why did the session have I didn't have a googly question. So I'm not an avid reader. So I have not finished a book completely. So I just pick up books that or read through synopses which I think are interesting. So I would be the wrong person to recommend a book completely. I've not.
Okay.
So whatever I've learned is
Or any online resource.
I know I read through Ken. I read through a couple of some news channels. I mean, I subscribe to, but I've never been an avid reader of books per se.
Okay.
What I've gone through is through what
Alright.
I've on the job.
Okay. And what is your favorite way to like if people in the session today, if they want to reach out and pick your brains for something, what is the best way to
Please,
reach out?
I'm
Is it
open.
email or Twitter, LinkedIn?
Yeah, at LinkedIn, I accept every single request that comes on LinkedIn, and most of the requests. If it's related to the startup industry and the HR and all that,
Absolutely.
But if Gautam wants to connect me to anybody, or you want to connect me, I'm happy. If anybody wants any help,
Sure.
please do connect.
Sure. Thank you so much for saying that.
Thanks.
It was an absolutely fun, and useful session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for your comments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ujjwal. Thank you so much, Balram. So thank you so much, Balram, and we look forward to having you next week for the pitches.
Yeah.
So we'll have about 10 startups that we've curated. For the rest of you, we'll have a session next week as well. And for the for those who are receiving the invites for the pitch session, I look forward to you to seeing you at the Kickstart pitch session. And I'm sure Tushar is going to write to you specifically with more details on the startups and the pitches. Just like what Balram said, this could be a first pitch session that you're there as an investor. So just enjoy it and experience it. Definitely, look at what senior investors out there from the ecosystem are doing in terms of maybe grilling the startup or grilling the founders with the questions, etc. It'll definitely be a great experience. Like what Balram said, you learn more on the job than from books. So I think this could be, the start to your journey as an investor. Look forward to, Kickstart next week. Thank you so much to all of you.
Hey, Gautam, I mean, books are good, Gautam. I'm just not able to read a book completely. That's all. Books are really good. I'm just not able to read one. That's the only issue.
So Balram in his usual style, throws a disclaimer there.
So after Ujjwal put me into this, I have to read at least one book now to go tell somebody else I've read a book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll keep it in mind. I'll ask you again next time we do a workshop.
Definitely. At least I get the name of the book and some synopsis.
Ujjwal, I would personally say after 55 investments, Balram should write a book.
Yeah. No, that's correct.
Great.
Wonderful.
Everybody, I wish you all the best. Wish all participants here happy investing, right? And I think you should go with the mindset of giving back than making money. Making money is it comes the more you give, the more you get, right? So making money comes as a byproduct, not as a main product. As long as you go to learn, as long as you go to and support, I think the byproduct will always be there. All the best.
Thank you so much, Balram. Golden
Thanks,
words.
Gautam. You do a fabulous job. I think you could have taken the session. I don't know why you didn't do it.
I think I'm better off moderating. Thank you so much, Balram. Thanks all of you. I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.